Hello and welcome to WP Dominate. Today we're going to be setting up a new WordPress website with MAMP Pro. So why don't we get started? First, we're going to have to download a copy of WordPress. So open any web browser. I happen to use Chrome. We're going to go to wordpress.org. We're going to download WordPress. I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to be downloading a tar. Okay, we can come back to that later. The next step, we're going to open up MAMP Pro and we're going to set up a new host name. Host name is a fancy word for a domain, basically. And what we can do with MAMP Pro is set up several different domains on our computer and host websites locally, meaning that they'll be hosted on our computer. So to add a host name in MAMP, we're going to click the little checkbox here at the bottom of the screen while on the host tab. It's going to ask us for our server name. For this lesson, we'll just call it example site.dev. And we can use any top-level domain that we want here. I choose .dev, because it has the same number of letters as a regular top-level domain would, like the .coms or .nets, which makes it easier when you actually get around to migrating the website. And it also reminds me that it's the dev version of the website and not the live.com version of the website. Next, we're going to have to point our domain to our document root. So we're just going to click on that little folder icon that allows us to select our document root. And document root is basically just a fancy way of saying folder that is going to have all of our website's files. By default, MAMP puts your document root in its own htdocs folder, so it would be located under applications, MAMP, htdocs. Personally, I prefer to put them in my own sites folder on my Mac username, just because it's a lot easier when I'm working in terminal or another command line application. It's just a lower amount of directories that I have to write out when I'm actually trying to get to my website's files. So within that sites folder, we need to add a new folder for our website. And to do that, we just click the new folder button and then say what our new folder is going to be named. I like to name it exactly what my host name was. That way I can stay organized when I start to accumulate a lot of websites. So in this case, I would just name it example.dev, and it would add it right within my sites folder. Once I click choose, that's going to choose example site.dev folder as our document root. This is where all of our WordPress files are going to go, and this is all the files that are going to be served when we type example site.dev into a web browser. Okay, we'll see an example of that in just a second. Now when I go to save, and I have to save, otherwise none of these changes will be saved, MAMP Pro is going to ask me if I want to restart the servers. Every time we create a new host, we do have to restart the servers. This will allow MAMP Pro to go through a number of tasks that sets up our host name on our computer. So our servers restart, and once that is completed, we can actually go over and take a look at what MAMP has done. So if we open a new tab here in Chrome and we type in example site.dev, we're going to see a default MAMP page. MAMP drops in a couple files, its own logo and its own simple HTML file, just to show us that our host was set up successfully. So we know that when we start loading files in, everything's going to hopefully work the way that it's supposed to. And I actually like to delete these files just so I can start with a clean directory and add in all the WordPress files. That way I don't have unnecessary files as I'm starting to build my WordPress site. So if I want to do that, I'm going to find my sites folder. Okay, I'm going to go to examplesite.dev, the host name that I just created. And there are those two files that MAMP puts in there automatically. That's one of those tasks that MAMP Pro goes through when you restart the server. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete those. Okay, next we need to add the WordPress files. So we're going to go back to where we downloaded WordPress. We're going to unzip the tar. And we're going to move all the files in the WordPress folder over to our MAMP document root. And I like to copy them just so I can reuse the same set of files over and over and not have to download WordPress every time I want to create a new website. Okay, so we're going to go back to examplesites.dev and we're going to paste in all of our files. Okay, and we can see all of our files copy over into our examplesite.dev. The next thing we're going to want to do is create the database that is going to be used by WordPress. So when we go to install WordPress, it's going to automatically create all of our database tables for us in the install wizard. But first we actually need to create that database. To do this, we can use a link right on MAMP Pro to go to one of our tools that will help us create the database. Okay, so if we click on the MySQL tab, it gives us some options of tools that we can use to administer our database. For this tutorial, we're just going to stick with PHPMyAdmin. So if we just click on that PHPMyAdmin link, it'll open up a new tab in Chrome, and we can just add a new database. Okay, under Create Database, we're going to add our database name. Again, with a database name, I like to name it the same exact thing that I named both my host name and my document root. So I'm just going to call it example site. For collation, here in the US and other English speaking countries, we use UTF-8 general CI. If you know that you have a different collation, go with it. Otherwise, just stick with UTF-8 general CI. We're going to click create, and that will create our database for us. The next thing that we're going to want to do is, oops, let's see if I can get to it here. We're going to copy wp-config sample, and we're going to rename it to wp-config. Okay, this document takes care of a lot of the setup stuff that WordPress goes through. And the only reason that we would need it right now is to set up the database credentials for the database that we just created. Okay, so I'm going to drag wp-config over to Sublime Text, my preferred text editor. And you'll notice that there are several lines here where we can actually change our database credentials. Okay, so the database name is going to be the database that we just set up. We simply just called it example site. Here you're going to have to input your actual database username that you set up in MAMP Pro. I kept mine as root because I'm the only one that can access it on my computer. If other people were able to access this, you would want to create different users, as using root is a security hole. I did, however, change my password from root to a password that I use for a number of things on my computer. So I'm just going to go ahead and input that here. Okay, so my user is root, and my password is super secret, and no one's going to know it. You're going to input your own password there. Then all I have to do is save this file. Okay, and we can get rid of it for now. Open a new tab. Let's type in examplesite.dev again. And now instead of that MAMP Pro default page, we see our WordPress install wizard. So we can go ahead and work our way through that wizard. And if all goes right, we should have a brand new WordPress website. Okay, so we're just going to call our site example site. Username, I will put my name. I will put my super secret password. Even though WordPress thinks it's very weak, I disagree. Put it in email. I will do my WP Dominate email. I want to allow search engines to index this site because I want people to be able to find my content. I click Install WordPress, and it's going to install everything and create the database the way that we just instructed it to. So if I want to go back over to PHPMyAdmin and take a look at that database, if we go to example site, we can see that WordPress added a bunch of tables for us and filled those tables with necessary data. Okay, so now if I click the login button, it'll bring me to the login screen. I can type in my username and password that I set up in the install process. And we have a new WordPress website. Okay, this is the back end, the WordPress admin. If I want to take a look at the front end, I can just go to examplesite.dev. And this is the front end of our default install of our new WordPress site. Thank you for joining. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and we will see you again.